And good morning once again, my friends at Living Hope Community Church, Iglesia Esperanza Viviente. What an awesome opportunity we have one more time today to study God's Word together. Thank you for being here. Today we find ourselves in a very interesting passage in Mark chapter 10. Jesus is moving towards Jerusalem. He knows the passion is near. In fact, by the time we get to Mark chapter 11, to the end of the book, basically, is the passion of the Christ. His triumphal entry, his last teachings, his mock trial, his crucifixion, and his resurrection. Well, on the way to Jerusalem, something happens that's really fascinating. You know, we think about, does God care about me? Have you ever thought that? Am I important to him? Does he listen? Well, I want you to see who Jesus ministers today, but I also want you to see the fact that the people that are going to receive Christ and believe from here throughout the Passion, number one, it's a very limited group. And number two, it's a group that you might not assume would be the group that would respond. Very, very interesting. Let's go for it here. We're in Mark 10, starting at verse 46. And here comes the story. They came to Jericho. All right. We'll look at that in a second. And as he was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a great crowd, again, remember that Jesus is almost plagued by huge amounts of people pressing in all around him throughout his ministry. Well, here we see a guy. His name is Bartimaeus. He's a blind beggar, the son of Timaeus. He's sitting by the roadside. Okay, now, when you're blind in the ancient world, okay, you're particularly outcast. It's not just that you can't see and therefore you need help with a lot of different things. Maybe you can't hold particular jobs that other people can hold. Maybe you have no source of income, so the only thing you can do is beg by the side of the road. That's where we find Bartimaeus in verse 46. But there's more here. When you're blind, particularly in the ancient world, the assumption of society is you're blind because you're cursed by God. I don't know if you remember John chapter 9, but the question is asked about the blind man here. Why is that man blind? Was it because of some sin he committed or his parents? The assumption in that society was blindness is an active judgment of God against you. So Bartimaeus is not only dealing with the consequences of not being able to see, but he's also dealing with that attitude that people think he's been rejected by God. All right, just consider that as we go forward in this story. So here we have his name. That's another thing maybe to mention. It may be the case that we are told his name here in Mark's Gospel, which, by the way, Matthew has an account of this, Luke has an account of this. In Mark's Gospel, the blind beggar is given a name. His name is Bartimaeus. And it may be the case that as the church grew, that Bartimaeus played a role. And perhaps that's why his name is here. Okay, so let's just go to the map for a second. I realize this is a little bit small, but just imagine that that's the Sea of Galilee, right? Jesus has done the majority of his ministry right here in this region. If you see up there on the top left by the little white box, he did go up to Tyre and Sidon, but the miracles, the teachings, the Sermon on the Mount, all the things that, you know, encompass a majority of Jesus' ministry have been done in this region of the Sea of Galilee. Now, he's moving south. Now, if you look in this circle, you'll find Jerusalem, Judea, Bethlehem, Bethany. This is where the Passion occurs. But right now we're told that he's going to Jericho. And that number 17 there, that little dot That's the city of Jericho. He's crossed the Jordan from the east to the west, and now he's on his way to Jerusalem. I just want you to see, as his ministry concludes, at least I should say his public ministry, there are people that respond to him. We'll see as we go through this passage that the blind beggar, right, the one people reject, Bartimaeus, he'll respond to Jesus. We'll see further as the story goes to its conclusion that in this same Jericho region, there's a tax collector mentioned in Luke 19 named Zacchaeus. He comes to faith in Jesus Christ. Now just notice, who do you think should be able and willing to recognize the Messiah? Certainly those who have studied the Old Testament and should fully anticipate the qualifications and the mission of the Messiah should recognize him. But you'll see on this list, there's no Jewish leadership on this list at all. All right? There's the outcast of the beggar. There's the outcast of the tax collector. Just keep in mind, people hated the tax collectors, right? Well, that's probably still true today. But as you move forward, there's the thief on the cross hanging next to Jesus because he is a thief, he is a robber, he does deserve the punishment he's receiving, but yet and still, Jesus tells him, look, today you're going to be with me in paradise. Jesus brings this man to himself even as he suffers death on the cross. And then there's the Roman soldier in Mark 15 that says, truly, this is the Son of God, after he watches Jesus die. These are the people that respond to Jesus. It's not the Jewish leadership. It's not the people that should automatically be able to identify the fact that Jesus is doing what only God can do. Jesus is doing what the Messiah was predicted to do. Jesus is the Messiah. No. They don't see it. But the outcast of the beggar sees it. He's blind, but he can see. The tax collector sees it. The thief on the cross understands it. The Roman soldier understands it. And while I'm thinking about it, let me just say this. When Jesus calls the Jewish leadership blind throughout the Gospels as they have their exchanges, I just want you to understand that there's more to it than you just don't understand. Again, the curse of God is judging you because you can't see was common to think about blindness, but that curse would follow through on Jesus' accusation of the blind leadership. You guys not only don't understand, but you're under God's curse because you won't come. All right, well, anyway, back to the story. Let's go back to Mark 10, verse 47. Blind beggar Bartimaeus, he's sitting by the side of the road, and he hears that Jesus of Nazareth is coming by. Understanding that a blind person's hearing is oftentimes very acute, he understands the crowd is rustling and bustling, something unusual is happening. He's told that it's Jesus. He must have heard of Jesus somehow. I would assume that most of the population has heard of Jesus, because that kind of news spreads like wildfire if people are getting healed and transformed. Well, what is Bartimaeus' response to understanding that Jesus might be in the vicinity? He began to cry out. He doesn't say Jesus of Nazareth. He says Jesus, son of David. What does that imply? Well, son of David was the common term for the Messiah. Everyone knew that the Messiah would come through the line of David. Matthew's gospel starts by giving us a genealogy saying Joseph's line comes through the line of David. Luke's genealogy says Mary's line comes through the line of David. Jesus is doubly qualified, having come through the line of David with his earthly father and his mother. Bartimaeus is screaming out, Jesus, son of David. He is acknowledging who Jesus is as Jesus is walking by. And his request, have mercy on me. Have mercy on me. All right, he pleads for mercy. So far, Bartimaeus' theology is exactly right. I'm going to call out to Jesus, I'm going to recognize who Jesus is, and I'm going to present my request to him. That's exactly what's happening here. How does the crowd feel about blind beggar Bartimaeus? Well, they rebuke him. They rebuke him. This is a strong term. Many rebuked him. It wasn't just one guy telling him to be quiet. Many people in the crowd are telling him, would you please be quiet? But one thing I love about blind beggar Bartimaeus, he does not take their admonition. He says, look, I know who's walking by, and I need help, and I know he's the only one that can help me. You guys, you're not going to help me. I don't care what you think of me. I don't care how much you want me to shut up. I am going to cry out to God and present my request to him. And that's exactly what Bartimaeus does. He cried out all the more. Son of David, same title, have mercy on me, same request. So imagine the crowd's bustling and hustling. Jesus is going by, and they keep hearing this one guy somewhere in the crowd screaming out, Son of David, have mercy on me, over and over and over. Well, now we shift the story to Jesus' response. Jesus stopped, and he said, call him. I don't know where he is here, but get him over here. I want to talk to him. So they called the blind man. All right, hey, guess what? All your ranting has paid off. Take heart, get up. He's calling you. So now blind beggar Bartimaeus has to figure out where Jesus is, except now instead of the crowd rebuking him, maybe they're helping him find him. But you need to see this next sentence because it's very interesting. It says, and throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. Now what you need to know about this region of the world is it's almost like a desert. It's really hot in the day, and it's really cold at night. When you're blind and you throw off your cloak, that's the thing that keeps you warm at night. You're either very trusting that somebody in the crowd is going to bring your cloak back to you, or you're demonstrating total abandonment to whatever Jesus has for you. That you're not worried about your cloak, you're worried about talking to Jesus, and your physical comfort, the things that you would hold on to protect yourself, are no longer meaningful. Throwing off his cloak, he sprang up. Nothing wrong with his legs, just his eyes. And he came to Jesus. He responds to the call of Jesus. He's calling to Jesus, have mercy on me, and Jesus is ready to talk to him. But this exchange is so interesting. And Jesus said to him, what do you want me to do for you? I mean, this is really an echo of what we just heard in the passage before this. You remember that the disciples were fighting about who was going to be the greatest. James and John had come to Jesus and asked him to do whatever they wanted. He said, what do you want? What do you want me to do for you? They said, well, we want to sit at your right hand and your left hand. And Jesus said, well, I'm not willing to grant that. I don't have the authority to grant that, right? It's been prepared for who the Father says it's prepared for. Well, so those who are his disciples in that question don't receive the answer they wanted. But here we have the blind beggar standing before Jesus, and Jesus asks him the same question. What do you want me to do for you? And the blind man said to him, Rabbi. Oh, the title's changed. Now he's being addressed as teacher. He's acknowledging the power and the authority of Jesus. Let me recover my sight. Jesus, I come to you. I'm calling to you. I want to see. Now the miracle that's performed here is got to be just mind-boggling. Even today it would be mind-boggling. Who can restore that optic nerve and the rods and the cones and the lenses and the retina? And I can't go through all the parts of the eye. I'm not that smart. But just think about all the things that have to be realigned and reconnected for an eyeball to come back to life. It's clearly impossible in any other way other than God's touch. Well, Jesus said to him, "Go your way. Your faith has made you well." With that one little sentence, the power of God is released into the eyes of Bartimaeus. Everything gets reconnected, everything gets refocused, everything becomes operational again. And Bartimaeus, for the first time in who knows how long, we haven't been told whether he was blind from birth or had some sort of degenerative problem where he became blind later in life. We don't know, but all of a sudden we see that he sees clearly. And the irony, he not only sees the physical world, but he sees Jesus. He knows in his heart who Jesus is. He sees him spiritually speaking. Jesus is the Son of David. Jesus is the teacher. Jesus is the one who has the power to heal. And now he physically sees him as well. And again, Mark gets to use that word he likes to use. Immediately he recovered his sight. What does he do? He follows him on the way. The blind beggar Bartimaeus is now touched by the living Lord, and his response, I think it's Luke's account, is that Bartimaeus is also worshiping Jesus as they're going along the way. So he not only sees physically, but he's become a child of God. He believes, and he's exercised his faith by going to the Lord and calling to him, and the Lord is not ashamed of him at all. That idea that he's cursed by God because he's blind is not true. No, in fact, Jesus is easily willing to receive him, to heal him, and let him follow. Beautiful, 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 beautiful story. In the end, it teaches us a lot, church. Jesus has great compassion. Jesus has great power. And the one who calls out to him unrelentingly, right? He just keeps bringing the issue of life to God, receives the response. Very good to understand. I hope you take it to heart today. Church, serve him well today. God bless you.